share my screen before I do anything else. But yes, as Jack said, I worked for a decade as a guard at the Met. And before I tell you who I am and how I ended up there, I want to bring you to the Met itself. So we imagine we approach from East 82nd Street here, and you've got this facade that's so wide that no matter where you're standing, you can't get the whole thing into view. And this is kind of emblematic of the Met as a whole. I spent 2,000 days standing in these galleries, but I might have spent 10,000 days and I wouldn't be able to wrap my mind around the place. But I'll tell you what I see sort of as a guard. I think to myself, well, down in the south there at 80th Street, you've got the parking garage entrance. All the way at 84th Street, 4 blocks to the north, you've got the loading dock entrance. In between, you've got this sweep of marble stairs that ascend from, the grimy, mean streets of New York into this great temple of art. I can tell you as a guard, we don't climb those stairs. You enter by the loading dock. You pass one of my colleagues in a Century booth here who's checking in big white trucks that might be carrying paintings on loan from the Louvre, or they might be carrying hot dog buns for the cafeteria. You can't be sure. You walk that ramp down and down and down into the Met's vast backstage. So the Met sits on 12 acres of Central Park. You can imagine that just as big as it is above ground, it is exactly as big underground. I would boop in my credentials and I would walk these concrete floors with duct work and wiring overhead and these yield to art and transit signs as people push things by in push carts. And I'd be passing wood shops and plexiglass shops. There's a printer, there's an armory for when, a helmet goes on the fritz. There's conservation studios, there's storage facilities. But where I'm headed is a locker room for more than 500 Metropolitan Museum of Art guards. This is just a tiny fraction of them. I push in, there's conversations going on in a half dozen languages in the locker room. I get on my stiff polyester dark blue suit, head over to the dispatch office, and they look at me and they say, Bringley, section H today, which means I'm going to Egypt, or section K1, which means I'm going to Greece or Rome. Let's imagine that it is one of my first days on the job when I was sent most often to section B, which was my home section, the old master paintings. I would get assigned my posts for the day, and I would get on post about a half an hour before we open to the public, and it would be church mouse quiet. And the only sound that I would hear is my footfalls on these wonderfully soft wooden floors. I noticed that in the UK, you let guards sit sometimes. In America, we don't do that. So it makes a difference over these 8 and 12-hour days. And it would be wonderful because it would just be me and the Goyas, me and the Rembrandts, me and Helena, Rubens's wife that you see there on the right. And a wonderful thing about being a guard, you have all this time and there's no one to bring you back down to earth. You can use that time, as Jenny was talking about, any way that you want to think about these kind of vivid presences any way you want. And sometimes they feel like your companions because you're spending all day with them. And other times they look like windows onto these very strange sometimes, and other times very familiar sort of worlds. One place I was posted very often were what I think of as the Jesus pictures. That's in honor of a man he was walking through. He's probably looking for sunflowers by Van Gogh, or he's looking for water lilies. And he gets to yet another gallery like this. And he said, God damn it, I'm in the Jesus pictures again. I have to say, though I'm not a Christian myself, I adored working in these paintings. You have painting like this is made in the 14th century. If you know anything about the 14th century, you know that was a hard luck century. Maybe a third of Europe died in the bubonic plague. Bernardo Daddi, who painted this, likely died in the bubonic plague. And it makes sense, right, that at that time you would be thinking about the passion, which is just an old word that means suffering. And to be amidst all these pictures, it seems like the old masters took a huge range of emotions and telescoped them into this one story of this one man from first century Judea and his short life. And as a guard, I got to just bear witness to it. I wasn't a curator who had to study it. I wasn't a tourist who had to take a picture of it and gallop on to the next thing. I was a witness as much as one of these figures in the periphery of this Fra Angelico picture. And with all that time, with all that space, I found incredible solace in it. Because here's where I should say a bit about myself. So I started as a guard. I was just 25 years old. Previously, I had had a more kind of prestigious job. I was working at a skyscraper at the corner of 42nd Street and Broadway for the New Yorker magazine. I was just 22 years old when I got that job. So of course, I felt I was at the center of the world. Never mind that I wasn't writing for the magazine. I was in the events department. I couldn't have written because what did I know at 22 years old? What had I lived? But it felt like something. But then while I was working there, my brother, Tom, who's 2 years older, got sick, and he got very sick with what's called a soft tissue sarcoma. Turned out not to be the sort of thing that you're going to beat. And in New York City for me wasn't so much Midtown Manhattan. It was Tom's apartment in Queens, and it was hospital rooms, Beth Israel Hospital. And it was very clear that very heart-stoppingly momentous, beautiful, painful things were going on in those quiet little rooms. And it made it just as clear that kind of the nonsense and the office politics and the ladder climbing that was going on in the skyscraper at 42nd Street and Broadway seemed neither here nor there. So when Tom died, I wanted to do something nourishing. I wanted to do something straightforward. And I picked as my venue kind of the most beautiful place I could think of. I was sort of speechless in a way, and I wanted to remain so. And I got to be speechless around pictures like this, which obviously reminded me very directly of my particular experience, but just reminds us of the human experience, more or less. I mean, you have in pictures like this, these are from the same unknown master from Naples. On the left, that's an adoration. On the right, that's cut from a lamentation. And these are two primary, essential emotions, adoration and lamentation. And how beautiful is it that these two pictures look like they could have been part of the same scene? I mean, I think these are two sides of a coin. I think any of us who has been around someone who's suffering with maybe great bravery or sort of an admirable simplicity knows that your heart kind of brims at the same time as your heart breaks, because it's very beautiful, but it's also very painful. There's something fundamental, poignant. It's like you've reached kind of bedrock of human existence. And it seems like the old masters sometimes are painting that bedrock. That's kind of the feeling I get. But what was remarkable about the job is I wasn't just working there. The next day I'd be sent to ancient Egypt, and the following day I'd spend 12 hours in the Islamic thing, and then maybe I'd round out the day with 8 hours in the African art. And kind of the more time I spent there, the more years I spent there, the more I became convinced that, the Met, of course, is a museum of art, but it's not a museum about art. It's a museum about everything. It's a museum about life and death, and about the glory of creation and the splendor of, and the mystery and the diversity and the cosmos, but also intimate little moments. And what is all that? What is all this? And, I got to contemplate this stuff just day in and day out. And I would try to tell people as they asked me questions, one thing about working as a guard is you're not working in just among artworks. 7 million people come into the Met every year, and they would see me, and I look approachable in sort of my dark blue suit, and they'd ask me for the Mona Lisa, and they'd ask me for the dinosaurs, but they'd also, ask me to introduce them to this stuff. And I would tell them, well, we're here to learn about art, but we're also here to learn from it. And you are qualified to weigh in on these big questions that artworks raise and that life raises. When it comes to people, I just want to end talking about one particular person. The most extraordinary kind of collection of anything that the Met has is its guards. 500 guards are at the Met. And this guard is, I call him Joseph in the book. He's from West Africa, from Togo. He's holding my 1-year-old son, who's now 9 and upstairs from me right now. And I want to show you Joseph's favorite gallery in the Met, and you'll see why in a moment. This is a Ming Dynasty scholar's garden. It's called the Astor Court. above its moon gate there, it says, "In search of quietude." And it is self-consciously a world in miniature. That's what a scholar's garden is meant to be. It has mountains, it has streams, and it's meant to be a place where we go and are in this simplified place where we can kind of contemplate fundamentals. But the Met is a world in miniature as well. And when I give tours here, I like to end in this room. And it's a world in miniature in the sense of bringing all these cultures under the same roof. But it's also a world in miniature in that it has those 7 million people and it has 2,000 people who work there. And I'm sitting here with Joseph on his retirement dinner. This was just in December. He's the one on the right. And he's showing us his house that he's building in Ghana. He's going to retire half the time to Ghana. And he's showing his pictures on his iPhone. And I say, Joseph, that's the moon gate. There on the left, he is building his ode to the Astrocourt, to the Chinese Scholars Garden. So here we got a guy originally from Chicago. Yeah, I'm choking up. Here we got a guy originally from Chicago talking to a guy from Togo in a Chinese Scholars Garden that's in New York City about the version that he is building in Ghana. And, you know, that was just daily life at the Met. That's what I got to do on a Tuesday, you know, and I felt very privileged to be a part of the world that offers that. And I wrote this book called All the Beauty in the World because, you know, I wanted to focus on all the artwork in that place and all the majesty and splendor in that place, but also kind of everything the solitary individual brings into it and everything that all the workers standing around gazing at the masterpieces bring to it. So thank you so much, everybody. And thank you to 5x15. This is really cool.